For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Ilan Solomons, and I'm joined today by former Cricket South Africa President Dr. Mtutuzeli Nyoka to discuss his latest book, Deliberate Concealment, an insider's account of Cricket South Africa and the IPL bonus saga. What was the reason you decided to write this book?
You know, I felt my experience was not unique, that there were a number of people in different sectors in our country, outside sport, who were going through the same things that I was going through. When you're alone, you feel lost, and I thought I just needed to share my experience and lessons learned with them. I made a lot of mistakes, and I learned a lot of important lessons. And I wanted to share that with the country. I wanted to share that with even those who are not involved in similar issues, but just for them to know. Because from time to time, with the country we have, with the issues of morality and values we have, at some point, each and every one of us gets to a point where you find yourself having to speak the truth to authority, and it can be intimidating, and it can have dire consequences. Mm-hmm. And all I share here is how I dealt with that fear and those anxieties.
How has the book been received to date?
It's very flattering. I have had overall very positive feedback from a lot of people. Some I know, some I don't know. One gentleman in the Western Cape was generous enough to actually buy. He told me that he's buying 150 copies at one go of the book to distribute to people that he knows. A 15-year-old girl sent me an email. Now that our children are reading about this and preparing themselves for the future is also flattering for me. A lawyer who deals with international sporting bodies based in London sent me an email and said, I use issues in the book and some of the findings of the Nicholson Commission to advise my global clientele, from American basketball to English football clubs to Australian, what have you. And this is what this lawyer said to me. So it's enough reward, just those few responses for me.
A major emphasis throughout the book has been the issue of transformation and the empowerment of black cricketers. Do you feel that enough has been done to empower black cricketers?
You know, up to the time that I left, I can categorically say no. We all haven't done enough. We've let down black sportsmen as their communities. Mass participation policies of government have not succeeded. Obviously, the federation, there are things that they could have done better, and they didn't do better. And when I left, Makaya had just retired, and we were struggling to even find a single black African to play. Proteas, unfortunately, are the flagship side. We measure the success of development by how many players make it to the Proteas side. There were times when there wasn't even a single black African. So Tsoba was in and out, and then he was out completely. You know, up to a point where last year some of the black African cricketers threatened action. You know, so we haven't done enough. You know, and I point the finger at all of us. Schools cricket. That's where I learned how to play cricket. Schools. What is schools cricket like in the black townships? The situation cannot be worse today in 2015 than when I was a schoolboy in the 70s. It has to be better. There has to be some schools in the black areas that are good cricketing schools. I'm not sure how many we have. Now that effort does not require CSA. It's input. It's government, civil society, education department. Where is that effort? If you don't make that investment, what are we going to reap? In 20 years' time, we'll still be saying, where are they? So I think we have to collectively take the blame. And rectifying it, I think civil action and forcing people to put players into the team, short term, it works. But what about the long term? We have to look at the long term. It means all stakeholders must come together and sincerely draw up a plan involving everyone. I'd like to, before I die, to see maybe one game where half the side is black African players. That will be for me a fulfillment of sacrifices made by different generations of people, even before my time. If you want the strongest South African side possible, we are saying you've got to try and exploit all the talent in the country. The question is, are we? The answer is categorically no.
How would you describe the time you spent at Cricket South Africa, both at the domestic and national level? Can you describe some of the highlights and lowlights that you experienced?
Well, the highlights by far overwhelmed the disappointments. You know, cricket is a social thing, so you get to meet people. Mm-hmm. So I met a lot of wonderful people through cricket. The very best were surprisingly not your sporting luminaries. These were decent, ordinary South Africans, mums and dads and teachers who just loved the country and loved the game. And the support they gave, irrespective of what was happening in the boardroom and elsewhere, the support they gave to their children and to us, I can never forget. Obviously, there were other people that I met, you know, the sporting luminaries, the very greats that cricket has produced. To meet them was inspiring, and to have them meet my children. I mean, they inspired my children in ways that I couldn't. So it was an investment for my family, for me to meet them. And this is why I always say, I got more from cricket than I could ever give it, you know. And then the games, of course, the 438, nothing will ever match compared to that. Nothing ever. You'll live several lifetimes. You'll probably never watch a cricket game like that again. And I felt blessed and honored to have seen a South African team, that fighting spirit that defines us. It's just what gives me hope about this country, even with the problems we have, because I know no matter how despairing or how hopeless situation is on the sporting field or outside, there's this thing about South Africans of all races, that fighting spirit, that they never really give up until the end. And you learned that from that game, that 438 game. It was a hopeless situation. Some newspapers in Australia, because of the time difference, had already reported that Australia had won. And imagine the embarrassment of having to write another article to say, actually, it was an assumption. The win against Australia, the first series win in Australia, with Graham Smith battered and going there with his hand wired and having to bat out the time. That was another moment, another example that defined us as South Africans. So those were highlights. So I became a better person through cricket. The disappointments were nothing in comparison to the positive things.
In the book, you discuss the Indian Premier League of 2009, which came to South Africa as a result of the Indian elections. However, we know it was overshadowed as a result of the IPL bonus saga. Do you feel that it's been unfairly tarnished as a result of that?
It's unfortunate that that whole bonus thing reared its ugly head, because that was a moment of history for South Africa. You know, remember, there was no warning that we're going to host this. At the time, it was the biggest sporting event South Africa has ever had. And without warning, within a period of weeks, we had to host this game. I remember Trevor Manuel, who was Minister of Finance at the time, commenting that because of the IPL, 2 billion rands came into the South African economy. Remember at the time, 2009, global economy was imploding. A lot of countries, strong countries, first world countries, were reeling. But for a while we didn't. You know, Clem Santa wrote a brilliant article at the time about how well South Africa, and we're not just talking about cricket officials. When a big event comes like that, it's not just cricket leaders who must be on the ball, it's the banks, it's the hotels, it's the airline industry, the travel, all those things that Team South Africa Very, very, very strong. In fact, the blokes from London were going to host the World Cup in England, heard what was happening, and halfway through the tournament they came to observe how South Africans were handling the IPL, because they came and spoke to me and told me what they were. First world country leaders coming to South Africa to say, guys, now they were prepared for their World Cup. We were not. We were unprepared. So it was a historic moment. We must never forget what we have, the qualities, the very special qualities we have as South Africans. And it was Team South Africa Rainbow. It wasn't blacks, it wasn't whites, it was everybody working together for the good of the country. And the second IPL, 2009, held in South Africa, was bigger and better than the inaugural IPL held in India. And it's not just one person, and it's just not just one group, it's the collective working together. Again, those are memories and achievements that even when we have these painful incidents we see on TV of South Africans, young South Africans, pummeling each other, those memories I hold on to, because that's what, in spite of everything that makes me want to give up hope, but those are memories I hang on to say, I know South Africans are better than this.
Do you believe that Cricket South Africa is better off post the Nicholson Inquiry, or have many of the lessons been lost?
You know, I think CSA is better now than it was before. There's no doubt about that. They may not have implemented all the recommendations of Nicholson document, but it's far better for a number of reasons. Firstly, the Nicholson Commission led to a change of personnel. I think Gerald needed to go because he was not the right person to lead. So on a personal level, there were a number of changes, even in the board, that took place. I think Haroon Logart is an outstanding leader, and he will lead Cricket South Africa well. But obviously there were the reconstitution of the board, you know, the independent voice has been increased, etc. But I'm also optimistic that those clauses of the Nicholson findings that are not implemented now may, with time, be implemented. You know, it's a living document. It hasn't been thrown away yet. So I think we must give the federations time to ponder and consider and look at, but I am certain that with time, changes based on the Nicholson recommendations, not just in cricket, but in other federations as well. Implementing those recommendations will change them for the better.
You have a long history with the Medulla family, and you describe in the book repeatedly how painful it was for you to have a breakdown in relationships with Gerald Medulla. At the end of the book, in fact, you ask Medulla to reconcile with you and rebuild this friendship. Have you had any response yet from Mr. Medulla?
Not really. I haven't had from Gerald. But again, I'm a prisoner of hope. I think in time, our roads, our paths will cross. And in time, I think maybe as old men, we'll sit on the veranda sometime and look back at some of the disappointments and realize they were just nothing but disappointments. But a huge chunk of our life, we shared something very special. Not just him and me as individuals, but our families. My disappointment comes more from the rupture in the relationship between the families. I mean, when you read the book, you realize the person who got me into administration was Kaya. The person who pumped it into my mind that one day, all the time before he died, Kaya, that one day you were saying so to me. You will reach the pinnacle of the sport. I didn't believe him for most of the time. And his prophecy, because this is what it was amazing how it came through in a very big way. The rest of his family I know very well. Some of the younger kids in his family are like nephews and nieces to me. And they're very special people. His mom, I mean, was like a mother to me. So I do have hope, because none of this was done out of malice. I stood for what Gerald and I were raised to stand for. That's all I did. And I refused to betray that. All I did, really, was just to stand for what him and I were raised by both our parents. Not just the parents who were biological, but our sporting parents, the other fathers and mothers who raised us. There's nothing else that they told us except to enthrone the truth above all else. Now, I've betrayed the truth many times, but I always go back, even after I've betrayed it, go back to what those old men and women taught me. I always go back there.
At the beginning of the book, in your author's note, you address it specifically to your children. Why did you decide to do this?
Yeah, I think this, if I were to look at my life and say what is the most important thing in my life, I think it's fatherhood for me. Nothing else comes anywhere near close. Not the lives I save every day, not the other children who I help with education. And nothing is more important than fatherhood and my children. And what will I leave when I depart from this world? Two things: my son and my daughter. There's nothing else concrete that I'll be leaving behind except them. So it's important for me that they do know me. And I think for most of us, we don't really know our parents. You know your dad, but you don't know the man. You know your mom, but you don't really know the woman. So I thought for me it was important that when, with the passage of time, my kids mature and they start reflecting on their own lives, that I add on to what they know about who I am, so that my narrative in this book will be a voice from the grave that tells them who I am, my likes and dislikes, my humor, my philosophy, my fears, my anxiety. So I think not only to them, but also to their brood, the book will also help for them to understand who is this man, who really is this man who was our father or grandfather. So it's a monument in words. It's a lot of work, but to build a monument requires work.
Can we expect more books from you in future?
I'm always writing. I'm always writing. When I'm sleeping, I dream about writing. When I'm seeing patients, I'm thinking about writing. I'm always writing. I mean, until I'm physically and mentally unable to do so, I'll continue to build a monument for my kids, because that's exactly what it is for. It's not for anyone. If two people read my books, my son and my daughter, it will be the most rewarding thing for me.
And last but certainly not least, what do you think South Africa's prospects are in the upcoming T20 World Cup?
Our prospects are excellent. I speak as a South African, of course. I speak as somebody who's an eternal optimist. But I think our we've been producing great cricketers for the last 100 years, and we'll always produce great cricketers for the next 100 years. Our worst enemy is not the Australians or the English or whoever. Our worst enemy are ourselves. And once we overcome that, we'll be unbeatable. So I think for this World Cup that will be in the subcontinent, I would give our side a 5-star rating, and that in their prospects I'll say they are excellent or more.